hell let this black woman near my table?
I'm the groom's mother. I just wanted to leave a gift.
His mother? You're lying. There is no way my husband came from you. Get this disgusting woman out of my sight!
Please, I just want to give my son his father's watch.
Don't you dare touch anything with those filthy hands.
A slap cracked across the ballroom. 300 guests stopped breathing. The sound hung in the air like a thunderclap.
Crawl back to whatever hole you came from. You are nothing!
The woman didn't scream, didn't cry. She reached into her clutch, dialed one number, and whispered 4 words. That slap cost Victoria Ashford everything. Her marriage, her family's empire, and $1.2 billion. She had no idea who she'd just hit. 6 hours earlier, 5:30 in the morning, Harlem, New York. Grace Montgomery's eyes opened before her alarm. They always did. 40 years of discipline had built a clock inside her body that never needed batteries. She sat on the edge of her bed. The springs creaked beneath her. This brownstone had been her home for 32 years, long before the money, long before the magazine covers, long before the world learned her name. She could have lived anywhere. A penthouse on Fifth Avenue, a mansion in the Hamptons, a villa overlooking the Mediterranean. But this house still smelled like her late husband Raymond. His coffee mug still sat on the kitchen shelf. His coat still hung by the front door. And every morning, the sunlight still hit the hallway the same way it did when he was alive. Grace padded into the kitchen. The tile was cold under her bare feet. She turned on the small radio sitting on the counter. Gospel music filled the room, soft, familiar, steady. She brewed her coffee the old way. No fancy machine, just a stovetop pot, the kind that whistled when it was ready. On the refrigerator door, held up by a magnet shaped like the Statue of Liberty, was a photo of a little boy with a gap-toothed smile. Her son, Ethan, age 7, standing in this very kitchen, flour on his face, trying to help her make pancakes. Today, that little boy was getting married. Grace opened her closet. No designer labels screaming from the hangers. No price tags that could feed a family for a year. Just clean, simple, elegant clothes. The kind a woman wears when she has nothing left to prove. She chose a deep navy dress, classic, modest. She added pearl earrings, small ones. And around her neck, on a thin gold chain, she wore Raymond's wedding band. She'd worn it every single day since the funeral. Her phone buzzed. Ethan's name lit up the screen. "Morning, Mama." "Morning, baby. How are you feeling?" "Nervous, excited, a little of both. That's exactly how you're supposed to feel." "Mama, thank you for everything. I love you. I love you more, sweetheart. I'll see you there." She hung up, pressed the phone to her chest, smiled. What Grace didn't mention, what she never mentioned, was that Victoria's family had limited her guest list to just 10 people. 10, for the groom's mother, the woman who raised him alone after his father died. 10 seats tucked into a far corner of the venue. Grace accepted it without complaint. She wasn't going to start a war on her son's happiest day. That was her first mistake. Now let's talk about the other side of this story. Greenwich, Connecticut, the Ashford estate, 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a circular driveway lined with imported Italian stone. The kind of house that whispers old money from every corner. Victoria Ashford sat in front of a mirror surrounded by a team of makeup artists and hairstylists. Her wedding gown cost more than most people's cars. Her veil was hand-stitched by a designer flown in from Milan. Her mother, Diane Ashford, floated around the room like a general inspecting troops before battle. "The florist moved the hydrangeas to the left arch," Diane said. "I told Caroline to fix it immediately." "Good," Victoria said, examining her reflection. Oh, and Mother, make sure Ethan's side is kept contained. I don't want too many of his people in the main shots. It'll throw off the aesthetic. Diane nodded. Already handled, darling. Neither of them flinched at the word aesthetic. They both knew exactly what it meant. Here's what Victoria knew about Ethan's family. His father was white and passed away years ago. She assumed his mother was white too. Ethan never corrected her. He told himself it didn't matter. He told himself Victoria would love his mother regardless. He was wrong. Down the hall, behind a closed door, Bradley Ashford, Victoria's father, was on a phone call. His voice was low and tight. Words like liquidity problem and deadline extension slipped through the crack beneath the door. The Ashford fortune? It was smoke and mirrors, beautiful on the outside, crumbling from within. But today wasn't about the truth. Today was about the performance. And Victoria Ashford had never missed a cue. Until today. The venue was a private country club 40 minutes north of Greenwich. The kind of place where membership required a bloodline, not just a bank account. Iron gates, stone pillars, a sweeping lawn so green it looked painted. Old oak trees lined the driveway like soldiers standing at attention, their branches draped with white silk ribbons that swayed in the warm June breeze. Grace pulled up in her silver sedan. Not a limousine, not a town car with a driver. A 12-year-old Buick she'd bought because it reminded her of the one Raymond used to drive. She stepped out and smoothed her navy dress. The late morning sun caught the pearl earrings and Raymond's ring around her neck. She took a breath. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and gardenias. A young man in a black vest stood at the entrance, holding a clipboard. He looked up, looked her over, looked at the Buick behind her, then back at her. "Ma'am, the catering entrance is around the back." Grace didn't blink. "I'm not with the catering team." "Oh," he glanced at his clipboard. "Are you a guest?" "I'm the groom's mother." The young man's eyebrows lifted. Just a fraction. Just enough. He recovered quickly, forced a smile, and waved her through. "Of course. Right this way, ma'am." Grace walked past him without another word. She'd been mistaken for the help more times than she could count. In boardrooms, in hotels, in restaurants where she could have bought the entire building. It never stopped stinging. She just got better at hiding it. Inside, the venue was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. White roses and hydrangeas lined every table. A string quartet played softly near the altar. The scent of lilies and expensive perfume hung thick in the air. Gold-rimmed plates gleamed on every table. Each napkin was folded into the shape of a swan. Everything whispered one word: money. Grace found her seat assignment near the entrance, a small white card in an envelope. "Mrs. Montgomery, table 14. She looked across the room. Table 1 sat directly in front of the altar, draped in gold, extra flowers, reserved for the Ashford family. Table 14 was in the far back corner, next to the kitchen doors. She could hear the clattering of dishes from behind the wall. The tablecloth was plain white, no gold trim, no extra flowers, no swan napkins, just the bare minimum. Grace looked at the card for a long moment. Then she tucked it into her clutch and walked to her seat without a word. She sat down. The chair wobbled slightly on the uneven floor. Around her were strangers, distant acquaintances, plus ones, people who clearly didn't know the bride or groom well enough to matter. A woman next to her leaned over. "How do you know the couple?" Grace smiled. "I'm Ethan's mother." The woman looked confused. "Oh, I thought his family was seated up front." Apparently not all of his family. The woman opened her mouth to say something else, but thought better of it. She just gave Grace a sympathetic look and turned back to her glass. Grace folded her hands in her lap. She looked at the altar in the distance. From table 14, it looked like watching a stage from the very last row of a theater. She could see the flowers. She could see the candles. But the faces were just shapes. The ceremony began at noon. 300 guests filled the white chairs arranged in perfect rows across the lawn. The string quartet shifted to Pachelbel's canon. Sunlight filtered through the oak trees and cast moving shadows across the aisle. Ethan stood at the altar, tall, handsome. His light brown skin glowed in the sun. His hands trembled slightly at his sides. His best man, Derek Hollins, stood behind him and gave him a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Ethan looked out over the crowd and found his mother. Back row, far left, almost hidden behind a column of hydrangeas. Their eyes met. Grace gave him a small nod and pressed her hand over her heart. That was enough. It was always enough between them. The music swelled. The guests stood. Victoria appeared at the end of the aisle on Bradley's arm. She was stunning. There was no denying it. Her gown caught the light like liquid silver. Her veil trailed behind her like a whisper. Fresh white petals crunched softly beneath her heels as she walked. Every head turned to watch her. Every head except Grace's. She was watching her son's face, the way his eyes softened, the way his breath caught. She saw Raymond in that expression, the same look he'd given her 35 years ago at their own wedding in a tiny church in the Bronx. Victoria glided past the rows. When she passed Grace's section, her eyes swept over the guests without stopping. Not a nod, not a glance, as if Grace were part of the furniture. At the altar, Pastor James Wilson, a tall black man with silver hair and a deep, resonant voice, opened his Bible. He'd known Grace for 20 years. He'd baptized Ethan. He'd buried Raymond. Love, Pastor Wilson began, is not a feeling. It is a decision. A decision to see the person in front of you, fully, completely, without conditions. His eyes briefly found Grace in the back row. She nodded. Love does not ask where you come from. It does not measure the color of your skin or the weight of your wallet. Love asks only one question. Will you choose this person, even when it is difficult? Victoria smiled politely. Diane Ashford shifted in her seat. Bradley checked his phone under his program. The vows were exchanged. Rings slid onto fingers. The officiant pronounced them married. Applause erupted. Victoria kissed Ethan with the confidence of a woman who believed she had just claimed the greatest prize. The cocktail hour that followed was where the first cracks appeared. Guests spilled onto the terrace. Waiters glided between them, carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. A jazz trio played near the fountain. Laughter bounced off the stone walls. The golden light of late afternoon made everyone look rich and beautiful and happy. Everyone except Grace. Ethan spotted his mother standing alone near a pillar, holding a glass of water. Not champagne. Water. She didn't want to take anything she wasn't offered. He crossed the terrace in 3 strides and wrapped his arms around her. Mama, you look beautiful. And you look just like your father. He held her hand. Come on, I want you to meet Victoria. Grace hesitated, just for a heartbeat. Then she squeezed his hand. Of course, baby. Lead the way. They walked together toward the bridal party area. Victoria stood in a circle of bridesmaids, laughing, champagne in hand. The golden hour light made her look like she belonged on a magazine cover. Victoria, Ethan said, this is my mom, Grace. Victoria turned. Her smile was already fixed and practiced, ready for another guest, another compliment, another photo. Then she saw Grace. The smile didn't drop. It froze, like someone had pressed pause on her face. Her eyes moved from Grace's brown skin to her simple navy dress to her modest pearl earrings, then to Ethan, then back to Grace. "Oh," Victoria said, "I didn't realize—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Grace extended her hand. "It's lovely to finally meet you, Victoria. Ethan has told me so much about you." Victoria stared at the outstretched hand for 2 full seconds. Then she took it, briefly, limply, the way someone touches something they're not sure is clean. "Charming," Victoria said. Nothing else. She turned back to her bridesmaids. The conversation was over before it started. Ethan stood there, caught between 2 worlds, belonging fully to neither in that moment. His jaw tightened, his fist clenched at his side, but he said nothing. Grace gently squeezed his arm. "Go be with your bride, sweetheart. I'm fine." He opened his mouth to say something, but before he could, Diane Ashford appeared like a hawk swooping in from above. She took Victoria by the elbow and pulled her 3 steps away, but not far enough. Not nearly far enough. "You didn't tell me his mother was one of them." Victoria's jaw tightened. "I didn't know, Mother." "Bradley is going to lose his mind. How could you not ask? How could you not check?" "I said I didn't know. His father was white. I assumed—" "You assumed?" "Victoria, look at her. She's sitting at the family dinner of a $500,000 wedding wearing a department store dress. This is humiliating." Grace heard every word. Every single syllable landed like a small, precise knife between her ribs. She stood perfectly still. Her face betrayed nothing. 30 years of sitting across from hostile boardroom executives had taught her one skill above all others: how to absorb a blow without bleeding in public. She turned and walked back toward table 14. Her heels clicked softly on the stone terrace. Each step measured. Each step is deliberate. Not running, not rushing. Walking with the quiet dignity of a woman who knew exactly what she was worth, even if no one else in the room did. Behind her, Diane whispered to Victoria, "Keep her away from the photos, I mean it." Victoria nodded. Already handled. The cocktail hour continued. The jazz trio kept playing. The champagne kept flowing. The laughter kept rising. And Grace Montgomery sat alone, at the worst table in the room, watching her only son's wedding from the furthest possible distance. But what Diane and Victoria didn't know was that every word they'd whispered had just been overheard by a guest standing 2 feet behind them. A guest with her phone already recording. Dinner was announced at 7 o'clock sharp. A soft chime rang through the ballroom. Guests filtered inside like a well-rehearsed parade. The Ashfords in their circle claimed the front tables, while everyone else sorted themselves into the remaining seats. Grace returned to table 14. The kitchen doors behind her swung open and shut every 30 seconds. Each time they did, a blast of heat and the smell of roasted meat hit the back of her neck. Plates clattered. A chef barked orders. It sounded like she was sitting inside the kitchen, not beside it. The first course arrived. A delicate butternut squash soup with truffle oil. Grace picked up her spoon and noticed something small. Her place setting had no name card. Every other seat at the table had one, a little gold-embossed card with the guest's name written in calligraphy. Hers was blank, as if whoever set the table couldn't be bothered to acknowledge she existed. She ate in silence. Across the room, Victoria held court at table 1. She laughed louder than anyone, clinked glasses with her bridesmaids, leaned into Ethan, and kissed his cheek for the cameras. The picture of a perfect bride on her perfect day. Between courses, Ethan excused himself. He walked to the back of the room and knelt beside his mother's chair. Mama, this isn't right. You should be sitting with us. Let me talk to Victoria. Grace put her hand on his cheek. Baby, don't. Not tonight. This is your day. I'm happy just being here. But you're all the way back, Ethan. Her voice was soft but firm. I said I'm fine. Go back to your wife. He stood up slowly. His eyes were wet. He kissed her forehead, turned, and walked back to table 1. He didn't make it 3 steps before Victoria intercepted him in the middle of the dance floor. Where were you? I was checking on my mom. She's sitting by the kitchen, Victoria. The kitchen. The seating chart was finalized weeks ago. I'm not rearranging 300 guests because your mother feels left out. She's not left out. She's been shoved into a corner like she's invisible. Victoria's eyes narrowed. She lowered her voice to a hiss. Ethan, it is my day. Do not make a scene. Go sit down, smile, and let me handle the logistics. Ethan stared at her. For a moment, just a flicker, something shifted in his face. A crack in the wall he'd built to keep the peace. But then he swallowed it, nodded, walked back to his seat. He'd been swallowing things for 2 years. Every time Victoria made a comment about those neighborhoods, every time she changed the channel when a black actor appeared on screen, every time she joked about diversity hires at her law firm, he swallowed it all. Because he loved her. Because he thought love could fix it. Tonight was proving him wrong. The second course arrived, pan-seared salmon with asparagus. Grace ate slowly, watching the room. She noticed the wedding planner, Caroline Davis, approaching the photographer and whispering something. The photographer glanced toward table 14, then nodded and adjusted his route, walking in a wide arc that avoided Grace's corner entirely. They were erasing her from the wedding album. Grace set down her fork. Her appetite was gone. A few minutes later, the toasts began. Derek Hollins, the best man, stood up and gave a warm, funny speech about Ethan. He mentioned Grace by name. The strongest woman I've ever met, who raised the best man I've ever known. A few guests clapped. Grace smiled and mouthed "thank you" from across the room. Then Diane Ashford stood up. I want to welcome everyone to this beautiful celebration of love and family, Diane said, her voice dripping with rehearsed warmth. The Ashford family is so proud to welcome Ethan into our home. He is a wonderful young man, well-spoken, well-educated, and clearly raised with good values. She paused. Let the word "clearly" hang in the air just long enough for those who understood to understand. To the bride and groom, may your life together be everything this family represents. She raised her glass. The room followed. Not once did Diane mention Grace. Not once did she acknowledge the groom's mother by name. Not once did she look toward table 14. Grace sat still. Her hands were folded in her lap. Raymond's ring pressed warm against her chest. She could feel her heartbeat through the metal. After the toasts, the dancing started. A live band replaced the string quartet. The music was loud and bright. Couples flooded the floor. Laughter filled the room like champagne bubbles rising to the surface. Grace stood up. She wasn't going to dance. She wasn't going to mingle. She had made a decision. She was going to leave. Quietly, without drama, without tears. She would slip out the side entrance, drive back to Harlem, and call Ethan in the morning. She would tell him she had a wonderful time. She would lie, the way mothers do, to protect the people they love. But first, one last thing. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was Raymond's watch, a 1978 Omega Seamaster with a scratched face and a worn leather band. It wasn't worth much by auction standards, but Raymond had worn it every day of their marriage. He wore it when he walked Grace down the aisle. He wore it when he held newborn Ethan for the first time. He wore it on the last morning of his life. Grace wanted Ethan to have it on his wedding day. That was all, just to place it on the table beside his plate, a piece of his father at his wedding. She stood up and began walking toward table 1. Her heels clicked against the marble floor. The velvet box was warm in her palm. She kept her eyes forward, her chin level. Her breathing is steady. She passed table 6, table 4, table 2. She was 10 feet from the family table when Victoria spotted her. Victoria had been laughing with a bridesmaid. The laugh died on her lips. Her eyes locked onto Grace like a predator tracking movement in the tall grass. "Excuse me," Victoria said, not to Grace, to the room, loud enough that the nearest 15 guests turned their heads. "Where do you think you're going?" Grace stopped. "I just wanted to leave a gift for my son, his father's watch. I'll be gone right after." A gift. Victoria stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor with a sound that cut through the music. "You want to walk up to my table, at my reception, uninvited, and put your little gift next to my husband's plate?" "Victoria, please, I'm his mother." "You are not part of this family." Victoria's voice was rising now. Guests at nearby tables stopped talking. Forks went down. Heads turned. "I don't care what you are to Ethan. You were not invited to this table. You are not welcome at this table. And frankly, you are not welcome at this wedding." The room was getting quieter. The band played on, but the music felt far away, like it was coming from another building. Diana peered at Victoria's shoulder. She didn't say a word. She just stood there, arms crossed, chin lifted, a wall of silent approval behind her daughter. Grace looked at the velvet box in her hand. Then she looked at Victoria. Then at the 300 faces now watching from every corner of the room. She could feel their eyes. Some are curious. Some are uncomfortable. Some are already pulling out their phones. Grace took one more step toward the table. She extended the velvet box with both hands. "Please, it was his father's. It's the only thing I brought." Victoria looked at the box, looked at Grace's hands, and then, with 300 witnesses and at least 4 phones already recording, she slapped it. The box flew from Grace's hand and hit the marble floor. The watch skidded across the stone with a sickening scrape. The glass face cracked. The leather band twisted against the cold ground. Grace dropped to her knees, her navy dress pressed against the marble. She reached for the watch with trembling fingers. She picked it up and held it to her chest, the same way she'd held it the night Raymond died. "Don't you dare touch anything on my table," Victoria said, her voice shaking with rage. "Pick up your little trinket and get out." Grace looked up from the floor, on her knees, holding her dead husband's broken watch. Her cheek was still burning from the force of the slap that knocked the box from her hand. The room was completely silent now. The band had stopped. 300 people held their breath. And that was when Victoria made the worst decision of her life. Victoria raised her hand again. This time, she didn't aim for the box. She aimed for Grace's face. The slap cracked across the ballroom like a whip. Grace's head turned with the force. Her pearl earring flew off and bounced across the marble. A red handprint bloomed on her brown skin like a brand. "I said, get out. Are you deaf and pathetic?" Grace steadied herself, still on her knees, still holding the broken watch. Her left cheek throbbed. Her right cheek, where Victoria's palm had landed, burned like fire. But her eyes were dry, and her voice, when she finally spoke, was perfectly calm. "You're going to regret this." Victoria laughed. "Regret what? Putting you in your place? Honey, your place is behind those kitchen doors, not at my table, not in my family, not in my life." Diane smiled. Bradley looked at the floor. 300 guests sat frozen. And then Ethan moved. He had been standing 6 feet away, paralyzed, watching the woman who gave him life kneeling on a marble floor, slapped, humiliated, and holding his dead father's broken watch. Something inside him snapped, not cracked, not bent, snapped, like a bone breaking clean. He crossed the distance in 3 strides. He knelt beside his mother and took her hands, helped her to her feet, brushed the dust from her navy dress, picked up her pearl earring from the floor, and placed it gently in her palm. Then he turned to Victoria. His voice was low, controlled, but every person in that room heard every word. "Do you have any idea who you just hit?" Victoria rolled her eyes. "Some woman from Harlem who can't take a hint? Some woman from Harlem." Ethan repeated the words like he was tasting poison. "Victoria, my mother is Grace Montgomery. She is the founder and chairwoman of Montgomery Capital Group. She manages over $4.2 billion in assets. She has been on the cover of Forbes 3 times. The room didn't gasp. It inhaled. Like all 300 guests took a breath at the exact same moment and forgot to let it out. Victoria's smile melted. Not slowly, instantly, like wax thrown into a furnace. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her champagne glass tilted in her hand, and wine dripped onto her silver wedding gown, and she didn't even notice. Diane's face turned the color of old chalk. Her crossed arms dropped to her sides like someone had cut the strings holding them up. Derek Hollins, Ethan's best man, stepped forward. He held up his phone. On the screen was Grace Montgomery's Forbes profile. The photo, the headline, the number. 4.2 billion. He turned the screen toward the Ashfords and held it there. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. But the real destruction hadn't started yet. Bradley Ashford had been standing behind his wife, trying to disappear. Now his face was white. Not embarrassed white, ghost white. Because a thought had just hit him like a freight train. Montgomery Capital Group. G. Montgomery. The investor his CFO had been courting for the past 4 months. The firm that was supposed to save his collapsing real estate empire. The last lifeline between the Ashford name and bankruptcy. He had just watched his daughter slap that lifeline across the face. Grace looked at Bradley. She knew. She'd known from the moment she saw his name on the wedding invitation. She had said nothing. Because it didn't matter. Because she didn't use her money as a weapon. Until now. "Mr. Ashford," Grace said. Her voice carried across the silent ballroom. "I believe your company submitted an investment proposal to my office last month. $38 million. You should know, that proposal is now dead, and I will make sure every firm in my network knows exactly why." Bradley opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. His entire financial future had just been incinerated in one sentence. Grace reached into her clutch. She pulled out her phone, dialed. The room was so quiet they could hear the line ringing. "It's Grace. Send the team in. Front entrance." Within 4 minutes, 2 people walked through the ballroom doors. A woman in a tailored gray suit carrying a leather briefcase, Grace's personal attorney, and a man in a dark blazer with an earpiece, private security. They moved through the crowd like surgeons entering an operating room, calm, precise, professional. The attorney opened her briefcase, pulled out a legal pad, and began taking statements from the nearest witnesses. Victoria finally found her voice. It came out cracked and desperate. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know. Grace turned to her. The red handprint still glowed on her cheek, the broken watch still pressed against her chest. You didn't know I was wealthy? That's your defense? That you would only assault someone you believed was powerless? The words landed like a verdict. Several guests audibly reacted. Sharp breaths whispered, "Oh my God." One woman covering her mouth with both hands. Ethan reached down to his left hand. He gripped his wedding ring, pulled it off, and placed it on the table in front of Victoria with a quiet click that echoed louder than any slap. This marriage is over. Victoria lunged for his arm. Ethan, please, I made a mistake. Diane rushed forward, hands outstretched toward Grace. Mrs. Montgomery, surely we can discuss this. Grace looked at Diane the way a judge looks at a defendant who has just run out of appeals. You raised her. You don't get to apologize for the result. Grace's attorney worked fast. Within 10 minutes, she had collected statements from 9 witnesses and secured contact information from 4 guests who had recorded the assault on their phones. Victoria stood in the middle of the dance floor. Her silver wedding gown was stained with wine she didn't remember spilling. Her veil hung crooked. Her mascara had started to run in thin black lines down both cheeks. She looked like a painting someone had thrown water on. This is a misunderstanding, she kept saying. This is all a misunderstanding. Nobody was listening. The venue manager, a thin man in a black suit who had been watching from the doorway, approached Grace quietly. Mrs. Montgomery, we've already called the police. 2 of my staff witnessed the assault. We have security camera footage from 3 angles. Whatever you need from us, you'll have it. Grace nodded. Thank you. 15 minutes later, 2 officers from the Greenwich Police Department walked through the front entrance. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. The scene was contained. The evidence was overwhelming. And the suspect was still standing in the middle of the room, in a wedding dress. The officers spoke to Grace first. She gave her statement calmly. She showed them the red mark on her cheek. She showed them the cracked watch. She pointed to the witnesses. She pointed to the phones. Then they approached Victoria. Ma'am, we've received multiple statements and video evidence of an assault that occurred here tonight. We need to ask you some questions. Victoria's eyes went wide. You can't be serious. It's my wedding day. Ma'am, we need you to come with us. I'm not going anywhere. Do you know who my father is? Do you know who the Ashfords are? The officer didn't blink. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time. Please come with us voluntarily, or we'll have to proceed differently. Diane stepped forward. Officer, this is absurd. It was a minor disagreement between family members. Surely, ma'am, I have video evidence of your daughter striking another woman across the face in front of 300 witnesses. That is not a minor disagreement. That is assault. Victoria was escorted out through the front entrance. Not the back, not a side door. The front entrance. The same doors she had walked through 4 hours earlier as a bride. Now she walked through them with an officer on each side and 300 pairs of eyes watching her leave. Bradley tried one final move. He caught Grace near the exit. His voice was low and desperate, stripped of every ounce of the old money confidence he had worn like cologne all evening. Grace, Mrs. Montgomery, please, we can settle this privately. We can make this go away. Name your price. Grace looked at him. There is nothing private about what your daughter did in front of 300 people. And there is no price that buys back what she broke tonight. She glanced down at the cracked watch in her hand. Bradley followed her eyes. He understood she wasn't talking about money. He had nothing left to say. Inside the ballroom, Diane turned on her daughter's empty chair and hissed at no one in particular. How could she be so stupid? How could she not check who that woman was? Not, how could she hit someone? Not, how could she be so cruel? How could she not check? The racism wasn't the problem in Diane's eyes. Getting caught was. A bridesmaid quietly gathered Victoria's bouquet from the table. The flowers were already wilting. By midnight, the first video hit social media. 45 seconds of crystal clear footage. Victoria's voice, Victoria's hand, Grace's face, the cracked watch on the marble floor. By 1 a.m, a second angle appeared, then a third, each one worse than the last, each one capturing a different slice of the same ugly truth. By sunrise, the hashtag was everywhere. Justice for Grace, trending #1 nationally. The video had been viewed 2.3 million times. News outlets picked it up before breakfast. Every major network ran the same headline. Bride slaps groom's black mother at wedding. Doesn't know she's a billionaire. Victoria was formally charged with assault later that morning. She posted bail within hours. But bail doesn't fix what the internet has already seen. Ethan filed for annulment the following day. He didn't call Victoria. He didn't text. He just signed the papers and drove to Harlem. Victoria thought the worst was behind her. She thought the storm would pass. She thought people would forget. She had no idea that Grace Montgomery hadn't even started. 3 days after the wedding, Grace Montgomery sat in her attorney's office in Midtown Manhattan. The room smelled like leather and old paper. Sunlight cut through the blinds in sharp horizontal lines across the conference table. Her attorney, a woman named Patricia Cole, placed a folder on the table. It was already thick. "We're filing 2 actions," Patricia said. "Criminal assault, that's already in motion with the Greenwich DA's office. And a civil lawsuit against Victoria Ashford for assault, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and racially motivated harassment." Grace looked at the folder. What about a settlement? Their attorney already called. Twice. They want to negotiate. No. Patricia nodded. She'd expected that answer. "I want a public trial," Grace said. "Every word, every video, every text message, in open court." And that's exactly what she got. During discovery, Patricia's team subpoenaed Victoria's phone records. What they found inside was worse than anyone expected. Text messages between Victoria and Diane dating back 18 months, hundreds of them. A mother and daughter speaking freely when they thought no one was watching. Victoria to Diane, 11 months before the wedding. "Ethan mentioned his mom lives in Harlem. I'm praying she's not what I think she is." Diane to Victoria. "If she is, we keep her far from the photos, far from the guests, far from everything." Victoria, 6 months before the wedding. "What if our kids come out too dark? I can't even think about it." Diane. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Just make sure Ethan doesn't bring his culture into our home." Victoria, 2 weeks before the wedding. "His mom wants to sit at the family table. I said no, told Caroline to put her somewhere in the back. Problem solved." Diane. "Good girl." The texts leaked before the trial even started. Someone in the legal process, no one ever confirmed who, shared them with a journalist. Within hours, they were everywhere. Screenshots on every news site, every blog, every social media feed in America. The public reaction was volcanic. Celebrities posted responses. Civil rights organizations issued statements. A prominent senator called for the case to be treated as a hate crime. The hashtag Justice for Grace surged back to #1 and stayed there for 11 days. But the texts weren't the only thing destroying the Ashford family. Bradley Ashford's financial crisis, the one he'd been hiding behind silk curtains and Italian stone driveways, finally broke into the open. Without the Montgomery Capital investment, his primary real estate deal collapsed. The $38 million lifeline was gone. And Grace kept her promise. She made sure every firm in her network knew exactly what happened and exactly why she pulled out. One by one, Bradley's remaining investors disappeared. Phone calls went unanswered. Emails bounced back with polite rejections. Meetings were canceled with vague excuses that fooled no one. Within 4 months, Bradley Ashford's company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The Greenwich estate was put up for sale. The Italian stone driveway, the 6 bedrooms, the circular fountain, all of it, listed on a public real estate site for anyone to see. Diane Ashford's world crumbled in parallel. The charity board she'd chaired for 9 years, the Connecticut Women's Cultural Foundation, held an emergency meeting. The vote was unanimous. Diane was asked to resign. She fought it. She called every board member personally. She reminded them of her donations, her galas, her connections. None of it mattered. The texts had made her untouchable. She resigned the following Tuesday. No farewell event, no thank you plaque, just a 1-paragraph announcement on the foundation's website and a locked door. The criminal trial began on a Tuesday morning in October. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled every available seat. Cameras waited outside. The story had become national, a symbol of something bigger than one slap at one wedding. The prosecution played the wedding videos first, all 3 angles. The room watched Victoria's hand connect with Grace's face in high definition. They heard every word. They saw the watch skid across the floor. They saw Grace on her knees. Then Grace took the stand. She wore a simple black dress. No jewelry except Raymond's ring on the chain around her neck. She spoke the way she always spoke, calm, measured, precise. She described the seating, the name card that wasn't there, the photographer who avoided her, the whispered comments, the toast that erased her. And finally, the slap. I was on my knees, Grace said, holding my late husband's watch, a watch he wore every day of our marriage. She broke it. Then she broke something in me that I didn't think could still break. The courtroom was silent. A juror in the front row wiped her eyes. Victoria's defense attorney argued that the slap was a heat-of-the-moment reaction with no racial motivation, a regrettable impulse, a bride under stress. The prosecution responded with the text messages, all of them, read aloud, one by one. 18 months of documented contempt projected on a screen for the jury and the cameras and the country to see. The defense had no answer for the texts. There was no context that could soften them, no spin that could reshape them. They were what they were, a mother and daughter speaking their truth when they believed no one would ever read it. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty. Assault with a hate crime enhancement. Victoria received 18 months of probation and 200 hours of mandatory community service to be completed at a racial justice nonprofit. She was also ordered to pay a fine and complete a court-mandated cultural sensitivity program. The civil lawsuit concluded 2 weeks later. The judgment was significant, a number large enough to make headlines, but small enough that Grace never cared about the amount. Because she gave every dollar away. Every cent of the civil judgment was donated to the Raymond Montgomery Scholarship Fund, a newly created program providing full-ride scholarships to first-generation Black college students. Grace announced it in a quiet press conference outside the courthouse. No podium, no teleprompter, just a woman in a black dress standing in the October sun. My husband believed that education was the door, Grace said. This money will make sure that door stays open for the people who need it most. She didn't mention Victoria's name, not once. She didn't have to. The cameras flashed, the reporters shouted questions. Grace turned and walked to her car, a 12-year-old silver Buick parked at the curb. She drove home to Harlem. 1 year later. Grace Montgomery stood at the window of her brownstone in Harlem, the same window she'd looked through for 32 years. The same street, the same morning light, the same gospel music drifting from the kitchen radio. But something was different. On the wall beside the window hung a new photograph, a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Grace in the center, holding oversized scissors, surrounded by 24 young men and women in caps and gowns. The first class of Raymond Montgomery scholars. Full-ride students, first-generation college students, kids who came from the same streets Grace came from, and who now had a door that would stay open for them. Beside that photo hung another one. Ethan, standing in front of a construction site in Harlem, hard hat on, blueprints in hand, grinning like a boy who had just built his first treehouse. His architecture firm, Montgomery Design, had broken ground on its first major project, a community center, 3 stories, a library on the first floor, a mentorship program on the second, a rooftop garden on the third. Funded entirely by the Grace Montgomery Foundation. Ethan called his mother every morning now. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. Because the night of that wedding had taught him something he should have learned years earlier. That silence in the face of cruelty is not peace, it is permission. He never spoke to Victoria again. Victoria Ashford completed her 200 hours of community service at a racial justice nonprofit in Hartford. She showed up on time. She did her work. She said very little. The staff described her as compliant but hollow. When her hours were finished, she signed her paperwork and left without a word. She issued a public apology through her attorney. It was 4 paragraphs long. It used words like deeply regret and personal growth and committed to change. The internet read it, screenshot it, and tore it apart in under an hour. Too late, too polished, too empty. Victoria moved out of Connecticut. She left no forwarding address. Her social media accounts went dark. The bridesmaids who once surrounded her like a royal guard stopped answering her calls one by one. The wedding photos, the ones carefully staged to exclude Grace, were never published. Bradley and Diane Ashford sold the Greenwich estate at a loss. The Italian stone driveway, the 6 bedrooms, the imported chandeliers. All of it purchased by a developer who turned it into condominiums. Diane lost her seat on every remaining board she'd clung to. Bradley took a salaried position at a mid-level commercial firm, answering to a boss 30 years younger than him. The Ashford name, once synonymous with old money elegance, now returned only one result on Google: the wedding video. The video itself had been viewed over 40 million times. It had been analyzed on cable news, discussed in university classrooms, and cited in 3 separate law review articles about hate crime sentencing. It became a case study, a cautionary tale, a mirror. Grace never watched it. She didn't need to. She had lived it. On the mantel in her kitchen, beside Raymond's coffee mug, sat the watch. The 1978 Omega Seamaster. The glass face had been repaired. The leather band had been replaced. But if you looked closely, very closely, you could still see the scratch from the night it hit that marble floor. Grace kept the scratch on purpose. Some things shouldn't be erased. Grace didn't need a Forbes cover to deserve respect. She deserved it the moment she walked through that door. Victoria didn't lose everything because Grace was rich. Victoria lost everything because hatred made her blind, and cruelty made her reckless. The money just made sure the world was watching when it happened. So here's my question for you. Have you ever watched someone get dismissed, disrespected, humiliated because of the way they looked, and then the truth came out? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. If this story hits you somewhere deep, smash that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you even doing? Hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Remember, you never know who's standing in front of you. Treat people like they matter, because they do.
Victoria lost her marriage, her family's empire, everything, all from one slap. But let me tell you what really destroyed her. It wasn't Grace's money. Grace walked into the wedding as a mother, not a billionaire. A mother in a navy dress, holding her dead husband's watch, thus trying to leave her piece of his father next to her son's plate. And Victoria looked at her skin and decided she was nothing. See, that's the thing about hate. It doesn't make you cruel, it makes you stupid. Victoria had every reason to impress the woman. Instead, she slapped her on her knees in front of 300 people. The billions didn't destroy Victoria. Her own contempt did. The money thus made sure nobody could look away. But here's what stays with me. Grace kept the scratch on the watch. She could have fixed it. She didn't. Because some wounds shouldn't be erased. They should be remembered. So, tell me, have you ever been looked through, dismissed, treated like nothing, and then the truth came out? Drop the story below. I read everyone. If this hit you, like, share, and subscribe to my channel. You don't want to miss what's coming next. And remember, you never know who's standing in front of you. Treat people like they matter, because they do.